Hello everyone, welcome back to M's Language Academy. I'm M and today I want to talk about conditionals. A conditional is a special kind of sentence that follows a certain pattern. You always have a condition and the result of the condition. We can also recognize a conditional easily because it usually contains if, when, or unless. Now there are 5 basic types of conditionals. But today we'll talk about the easiest ones, the zero conditional, the first and the second conditional. All right, let's talk about the zero conditional. We use the zero conditional to talk about real conditions and situations in which the result is always the same. For example, if it rains, the street is wet. When I'm hungry, I eat something. Okay, so in this situation, it means that whenever I'm hungry, I eat something. The result is always the same. Whenever it rains, the street is wet. Turns out we can also use the word whenever in a zero conditional sentence. The zero conditional is usually very easy and students don't really have a problem with it because the structure is very similar in most European languages. You have if, when, or whenever, and the present simple plus the present simple. A very easy, simple structure. When the wind blows, the trees move. If there's a traffic jam, people get angry. What's the difference between if, when, and whenever? There's really no difference between if and when in a zero conditional sentence. It will change later on when we talk about the first and the second conditional. Whenever perhaps just means that we are putting more emphasis on the fact that really every time this happens, this other thing happens. We can also use every time in a zero conditional sentence. There's one more important thing. The order of sentences. In terms of meaning, it doesn't matter. You can say, when it rains, the street is wet, or the street is wet when it rains. The only difference is in writing, because if you start with the if clause, you always have to put a comma in the middle of the sentence. If I drink coffee after 3 p.m., I don't sleep. Or I don't sleep if I drink coffee after 3 p.m. Okay, now the first conditional. We use the first conditional to talk about a possible future condition and a possible future result. Long story short, we use the first conditional to talk about possible future situations. And let's imagine this situation. It's possible that it will rain tomorrow, and it is possible that it will be sunny. So I can say, if it's sunny, I will go for a walk. If it rains, I will stay at home. Or, if we don't leave soon, we'll be late. Okay, so as you can see, we use if, a present tense, and future tense. Why am I saying a present tense and not the present simple? Because we can use other tenses as well. For example, the present continuous. If it's raining at 5 o'clock, we will stay at home. So we can use the present continuous. We can use the present perfect. If you've finished here, we'll use the room. Now, the difference between if and when in the first conditional. Using if in the first conditional means that we are talking about a possibility. For example, I may be tired this evening. So if I am tired, I will rest. When we are sure that something will happen, we say when. For example, when you get home, call me. I am sure you will get home. If, for example, you live in a dangerous country or in a war zone, perhaps I won't say when you get home, but if you get home. What a dark example. In the second part of the sentence, we can also use going to. When I show him my new car, he's going to faint. The second conditional. We use the second conditional for imaginary, unreal, or hypothetical situations. In other words, something that we think will probably not happen or we are sure will not happen, right? Or something that isn't true. For example, I don't have $1 million, but if I had $1 million, I would buy a nice car. As you can see, we use if, past tense, although we are talking about the future, a hypothetical future, and then would. We can't really use when in the second conditional, but we can use could in both the if clause and the result clause. For example, if I could fly, I would jump out of this window. Or if I had $1 million, I could buy a nice car. One more important piece of information about this. When we use to be in the if part, we can use the normal past tense. For example, if I was a Jedi, I could use the Force, but it's very common to use were in all the persons. If I were, if you were, if he were, if she were, if it were. For example, if I were a millionaire, I wouldn't be making these videos. That's where the phrase, if I were you, comes from. You know, when you want to give someone a piece of advice, you can say, if I were you, I wouldn't do it. Or, I wouldn't do it if I were you. All right. Now, why is it important to learn about these things? For two reasons. Number one, to avoid confusion and to avoid mistakes. What do I mean by avoiding confusion? So it's important to know, especially the difference between the first and the second conditional, to recognize the difference between a possible situation and an imaginary situation. If I think something is possible, I should use the first conditional to indicate that it's possible. For example, a person who believes in UFOs will say, if I see a UFO, I will take a picture. A person who is an absolute skeptic, who does not believe in UFOs, will say, if I saw a UFO, I would take a picture. And by using the second conditional, they are letting you know that they consider this very, very unlikely. All right. Now, the second reason why we should understand conditionals is to avoid mistakes. The most common mistake that people make with conditionals is this. They use will or would after if, when, or unless. So instead of if I am tired, they say if I will be tired. Instead of if I saw Elvis Presley, they say if I would see Elvis Presley. So if you don't want to remember all the different definitions of different conditionals, you can just remember this to avoid the most common mistake. We do not use will or would after if, when, and unless. That's it. If you use will or would immediately after if, you can be 100% certain that you have made a mistake and that you still need to work on your English. What was that?
We would be honored if you would join us.
If you will not be turned, you will be destroyed.
The Dark Lords of the Sith can't use conditionals. What a shame. Send. Ha! That will teach you. What? Who? Really? Well, put him through. Lord Vader, I was just about to talk to you about your use of the second...
You have failed me for the last time.
Well, I'm sorry for the interruption. Let me amend my statement. If you say will after if, you can be 99.9% certain that you have made a mistake. There is, as always, one exception. Okay? In the sentences we have heard from our Sith friends, they use will and would in the meaning of want or be willing to do something. Okay, so when Darth Vader says we would be honored if you would join us, it means if you were willing or if you wanted to join us. And when Darth Sidious says if you will not be turned, it means if you don't want to be turned, if you're not willing to cooperate with me. In this case only, it is okay to say will or would after if, when, or unless. But this will happen very rarely. So remember, if you say will or would after if, when, or unless, you can be 99.9% certain that you have made a mistake. All right, that's all for now. I will probably make more videos about conditionals because we have barely scratched the surface. There's so much more to be learned about conditionals. And if you'd like me to do a more in-depth coverage of conditionals, please let me know in the comments. I'll see you soon. Lord Sidious, any final thoughts?
And now, dear viewers, go and bring proper English